right. After the State of the Union, Senator Marco Rubio from Florida had the Republican rebuttal, and he joins us live this morning from Washington. Good morning to you, Senator.
Hey, good morning.
Let me start with all I've seen online, and that is, what's the deal with the water bottle?
Well, listen, my mouth got dry and I had to get some water. And when you give a speech, you have a podium and the water's right there. And but when you don't, then you'll start looking around, where am I going to get the water from? And I figured I'd better off just taking that water and taking the hit for it than being unable to pronounce my words at the end of it. It'd been a long day of work. We'd already done an 18-minute recording in Spanish, and my mouth got dry. What can I say? But I was happy with the overall with what we were able to deliver in the speech.
Well, I saw that you tweeted a picture of the empty water bottle, and I
brought some with me now, by the way, in case we need it.
All right. Well, this is going to be about a 5-minute interview. Would you like to have a swig before we get started?
Sure. Let's do it now.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very nice.
All right.
Zero dark thirsty. I saw that referred to as what you did right there.
Good.
Hey, what'd you think of the president's State of the Union last night? He said essentially the state of our union is strong, but we're going to have to spend a lot of money. But don't worry, it's not going to cost us anything.
Well, look, the state of our union is strong in the sense that our people are strong and resilient. But the truth of the matter is we have some problems that we have to address. And if we address them, our kids are going to be the most prosperous Americans ever. And if we don't address them, we're going to be the generation that history says caused America's decline. That's how stark the choice before us is. As I said at the outset yesterday in my response to the president, our free enterprise system is what makes our middle class possible, not government. And presidents in both parties have understood this, from John F. Kennedy to Ronald Reagan. But this president believes that the free enterprise system, it's the cause of our problems. And that's why you saw yesterday that for every problem we have, his solution is a new law or a new spending program or something else. And that just doesn't work. That's an old idea that's been tried all over the world. It's failed every single time. And so what I hope the president will do is give up on this obsession that he has with raising taxes, and let's engage in a real conversation about how to bring the debt under control, and more importantly, about growing our economy rapidly, because that's the only way we're going to create the jobs we need and bring our debt down.
All right, Senator, we're going to put up on the screen a list of the president's agenda. He'd like to, I'm going to start with the second one, expand preschool programs. He'd like $40 billion toward infrastructure, more shovel-ready stuff. He'd like to combat climate change. And now the first item, he would like to increase the minimum wage from $7.25 to $9. During this first campaign, he wanted to raise it to $9.50. You don't think that that is a good idea, do you?
Well, a couple things. On the universal pre-K, that's a state issue. States should be allowed to do that. We have that in Florida. And I'm a big believer in early childhood education, but I'm not a believer that the federal government should mandate it. In terms of the other issues that you've outlined on the climate change, look, the government can't change the weather. I said that in the speech. No, we can pass a bunch of laws that will destroy our economy, but it isn't going to change the weather. Because, for example, there are other countries that are polluting in the atmosphere much greater than we are at this point. China and India, all these countries that are still growing, and they're not going to stop doing what they're doing. America's a country, it's not a planet. So we can pass a bunch of laws or executive orders that will do nothing to change the climate or the weather, but will devastate our economy, devastate it. And that's why you're going to find a lot of bipartisan opposition to cap and trade or any of these other things that the president's cooking up.
And what about my first item, or the last item I mentioned, first on the list, about minimum wage? You don't think it is a good idea to raise the minimum wage to $9?
Well, first of all, I want to see people making a lot more than $9 an hour in the United States. And the way you do that is through rapid economic growth, where people are being paid a lot more than that. $9 is not enough. I think we all would want that. The question is a minimum wage the best way to do it? And history has said the answer is absolutely not. In fact, the impact of minimum wage usually is that businesses hire less people. That's the impact of it. They'll just hire less people to do the same amount of work. It sounds good at the outset. I mean, if you tell people, should the government raise the minimum wage, people will say, sure, that makes sense, until you explain to them what it actually does historically. So just because something sounds good at the outset doesn't mean it's a good idea. And we have a lot of history to prove that the minimum wage, raising the minimum wage, does not grow the middle class. What will help us get people paid a lot more than $9 an hour is a fast-growing economy.
In addition to the State of the Union address last night, you had a busy day in Congress. You voted against the Violence Against Women Act. If you would, explain why.
Well, I'm in favor of the Violence Against Women Act. I'm not in favor of this Violence Against Women Act. I would have voted to reauthorize the existing law. I would have voted to reauthorize the existing law with some amendments. I would have voted for this bill if they would have taken some amendments. Just to give you an example, under this bill, it would hurt Florida because it would require the state to take money away from domestic violence programs and give it to sexual assault programs. If we want to fund those sexual assault programs, put more money in there for that. But don't take money away from domestic violence programs that are working well in Florida. And I made my opposition and the reason for it very clear. They refused to accept it. I'm not going to vote for it. But if it comes back clean of that, I'll be more than happy to vote for it. I don't know anyone who's in favor of violence against women.
As we've heard the President of the United States since the election back in November, he's really ratcheted up the rhetoric against guys and gals in your party. It's become much more confrontational. Would you say, as some pundits did post State of the Union address last night, that his real goal is a Speaker Pelosi about 2 years from right now?
Well, I don't know what his political goals are. I imagine he probably would like to see the Democrats control both branches of government. We know that when they did, they got Obamacare done, which has been a disaster. They got the stimulus done, which grew our debt. They got all these things done that are bad for our country. So I certainly think that that's what he would like. He's not going to get that because at the end of the day, we're not going to lose the House. I mean, I think the American people aren't going to give him a chance to do that. But look, the president has an agenda that's driven by his belief that our problems are the result of a government that's too small. And as you saw last night, to every problem that we face, his answer is either a tax increase, a new regulation, or a new government spending program. And that's been tried many, many times all over the world. It has never created the kind of vibrant middle class that we Americans believe in and want.
All right. Senator Marco Rubio, great job last night. Thank you very much for getting up early and joining us here on Fox and Friends. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys.